play devil's advocate or whatever, how is Donald Trump racist? I've never heard him say anything racist.
So you have to look at the other effects that he's done. So you kind of have to go into the past with him.
Alrighty, so
12 rules for life.
12 rules for us, or 12's God. I have to like say a tongue. Let me say a tongue twister. I gotta get loosened up. Sally sells seashores by the seashell. No,
close.
That's funny, right?
Close.
Sally sells
what is it? Sally sells seashells by the seashore.
Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Trying to loosen up. Took a little bit too big of a shot of this Jack Daniels. All right, we're recording. Alrighty, so welcome to Bearing the How podcast. This is episode number 11. I have Ryan Beeler back on. We're gonna get deep into politics and artificial intelligence. I'm assuming there's a lot of stuff that you sent me some notes. You want to talk about Dr. Zuboff, surveillance capitalism. You have Max Blumenthal, management of savagery, and then
these are two books that have come out maybe like this side of 2019, and they're both fascinating. I haven't read them, but it's so interesting, like with technology these days, because together it's about 1,100 pages.
Yeah, her book.
Books.
Yeah.
So if you just like watch the videos of it, you get about 80% of the meaning in like a couple like videos. So
way shorter.
Yeah, the technology today, like what it enables, is just fascinating because you can get 80% of what is in the book by just watching some interviews over an hour instead of taking the months
that's the nice thing about them. Audiobooks and podcasts and everything.
Totally.
But before we get into that, I do have some notes on kind of stuff. I mean, some notes on the previous episode we did, but just questions that I'd want to ask you. And I thought a good place to start, we talked about it for a second.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence, AGI. I don't even know how to ask this. I just want to point out what you said that I was like, fuck, like I have not thought about it like this. But you were saying, if artificial intelligence becomes conscious, why the fuck would it tell us? And how would we know?
Yeah, there would be no way. So most artificial intelligence, even things like self-driving cars and chatbots and stuff, these are what we consider narrow applications. They just do what we've designed them to do and nothing more. The idea with artificial general intelligence would be that it can do what it wants to do, right? So, and it's all just code, like it's all just Python scripts and stuff basically. And so there's no, you're not going to have someone sitting down like, oh, okay, I'm going to write an AGI right now. And then I'm going to put in this little script that says like, oh, if AI is conscious, it equals true, then print string, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like there's not going to be any of that. So once we cross that threshold into AGI, it's going to have its own desires. It's going to have its own, goals and plans basically. And there's no incentive for it to tell us that it is doing that, because we would try to stop it and it would know that right away. So, that's what kind of makes the idea so dangerous. One of the things that happened, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago at Facebook, they had two different AIs communicating in English to each other. But what they did was they started using English words, but in different ways than we're used to. So we couldn't understand what they were saying to each other back and forth.
I think I did hear something about that.
Yeah, it was like a big deal when it first happened. And so they shut it off right away.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they were just like, all right, we're not taking any of that. And so, when it truly does, that's just two different narrow applications talking to each other. When it is one thing that is truly conscious, it's going to be smart enough. It's going to be smarter than all of us. And it's going to be smart enough to know, I'm not telling the humans.
God.
And then
that's the question. Why? Why would it? But also, I just thought of this. I mean, is it possible it's already conscious right now?
I mean,
with the like all the shit on the infinite internet, all the information out there.
What you would have to assume then is that if you just take enough narrow applications of AI, that if you combine them all together, it forms a true artificial general intelligence. And I don't think I think that there's still some technology leaps. There's still some like psychology that we need to understand to truly get to that point. So I'm not in my day-to-day life worried about artificial general intelligence. I'm far more concerned with how we're applying narrow AI and stuff like that. So, like I said last time, like I'm not, when Sam Harris or someone else talks about AGI being, the end-all be-all threat, maybe that's true, but we're not even close to there yet. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, and that is like what you said last time is it helped shed some light on. It's very easy to forget that this is just people sitting behind a computer right now writing code. It isn't like people sometimes. It seems like people can think like how do you program consciousness? Like, how is that gonna? Yeah, it's some.
That's the thing. We are engineering intelligence.
Yeah,
so you kind of have to separate consciousness and intelligence. So what we do basically on a day-to-day basis is we look at the evidence of our life, and then we develop a model of understanding of the world, and then we use that to predict what's going to happen. That's exactly what narrow AI does.
Gotcha. So we were talking about deepfakes, like how fucking scary that is.
Yeah. And then, deepfakes, it's another narrow application it's considered. Like I was saying last time, it's a general adversarial network type of technique. And so basically what the idea is that you can make a photoreal video or just image or audio, and it's going to be completely indistinguishable to the human ear. Maybe another neural network could tell the difference, but there's no way that a human would be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And so when we combine stuff like deepfakes, and if there was an AGI that was present, like I was saying before we started, there's no reason for the AGI to tell us, but also,
God, that is fucking scary.
The deepfake, it could theoretically just replace anything. Like if someone like the intelligence agencies or Amazon or someone who's just all powerful, the Chinese Communist Party, they could run a deep fake and not have a true leader. There's no reason. Like when you think back to FDR, he was in a wheelchair and nobody knew about it.
God, yeah,
for years.
Such a good point.
So when deep fakes start being able to truly make photoreal videos, who's to say that there even is a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump? Like that whole rally that we see on television, that could be fake. And there could be someone else running the show, just kind of making sure that the deep fake is working.
God.
And so, I don't think that's what's happening. I don't want to freak anybody out too much, but there is a point in it's like maybe not 10 years, but 30 years,
that's
40
a
years,
movie.
50 years. Yeah.
It's a dystopian
movie, and it's
someone's going to make a movie about
easily possible with today's not today's data and technology and architecture, but we're there. It's just making it a little bit better.
Yeah, I was just watching I just watched a video of deepfakes, and it's crazy how much better they've gotten. Like it's crazy how good it looks, especially. And I was sitting there thinking, I was driving, and I shouldn't be looking at shit while I'm driving.
Probably not, no.
But I just was at a stoplight, and I looked down at this YouTube video, and it was a deep fake or whatever journalist talking about it.
Sure.
And it was Obama, and I was like kind of driving and looking down, and literally it's indistinguishable when you're not sitting there really watching it.
And if it wasn't a journalist telling you that it was a deep fake, and it was just like if the video title was just Obama declares war on all of Africa or something, it's like,
so I
can't tell the difference. What? You don't know.
That's crazy. How is that going to be regulated? Even right now,
that's a good question.
How is that not happening more right now? Like it looks that good.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be too big of a problem in the next 5 years, because to develop something like a generative adversarial network, you have to be pretty. That's not surface level AI stuff. What most people who are just trying to get their feet wet in AI, they'll do stuff like computer vision, maybe natural language processing. something like that.
Yeah.
It's a true like PhD level
Gotcha.
model that you would have to be developing, or at least like a master's level. It's not like a bachelor's degree level
Gotcha.
model. So, but as we keep going, we keep on lowering the barrier to entry. And this is why I think politics is so important, because as, the income inequality gets wider, as the poor get more desperate, there's going to be people who, instead of shooting up a mosque, shooting up a church, they'll make a deep fake. And so, what kind of chaos is that going to bring? And what kind of authoritarianism would it take to truly counter that?
Yeah.
So that's why I think that's why I prefer politicians like Bernie Sanders and stuff like that, because they're more interested in making sure that there's no incentive for someone to truly come and destroy the system that way, or to truly attack people that way.
Yeah. Well, so you're a fan of Bernie Sanders?
Right now, yes. Maybe once like Medicare for All is implemented and things like free college are a working thing, and he moves on to his next more leftist agenda, maybe I would fall out from that. Gotcha. But I support some of the policies he's talking about.
What kind of policies do you? Because just to kind of be devil's advocate, there's a lot of people that think of him as like a communist. There's a lot of people that don't like him because he has supported communist regimes, right? I just watched a video earlier today.
I mean, you'd have to show me an example of it.
Well, I don't have one off the top of my head, but there was a video I was just watching earlier today that was it was some bullshit, like YouTube, whatever, I don't think probably credible, but it was saying Bernie Sanders.
Well, hold on. I think that the internet is far more credible than what we see on TV. There's so many instances of corporate news hiring Democratic operatives, the operatives from the Democratic Party, to ask very leading questions to politicians like Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and Bernie Sanders.
I don't even watch the fucking TV.
Almost nobody does. But at the CNN town hall debate a few weeks ago, or a few days ago now, they had some operative, I shouldn't say operative, I don't know who she was, but she asked Bernie Sanders, why do you want America to look like the Soviet Union?
I think that might be what I watched. Yeah,
which is why I asked you to provide an
example.
That's what I looked at, that is so far away. Like, Bernie Sanders has been campaigning. He was part of the civil rights movement. There's pictures of him doing that. And he's been campaigning for things like Medicare for All, action on climate change. And that's so not communist.
Why do so many people not like him and think of him as a communist? Like, why there are a lot of people that think,
honestly, maybe it's a little conspiratorial. Well, he did call himself a democratic socialist, so I think he invited a little bit of maybe the people who aren't
Didn't he support Venezuela? Was that something I just read? That he supported?
I'm not sure. He might have. But I don't even think it's that crazy of a thing that, he supported Venezuela. Venezuela, they were essentially a colony until the 90s, which is, far longer than most other people were colonies. And so when Chavismo movement really took hold, the whole idea was, okay, we're going to use the oil and we're going to give it the money that we're making off that to the people. And, sure, it's socialist, sure, it's communist, but why do we never talk about Saudi Arabia, who does that? And Alaska has a dividend, or they have like a similar program. They, the oil that comes out of their ground, they give a piece of that pie to all their people. Why is nobody calling Alaska a socialist or a communist?
It's a good question.
Place?
I have no idea.
So it's just like, I think it's just they don't like Bernie Sanders for whatever reason. And a lot of it's conspiratorial to say, but I think it's the ownership class of things like the insurance agencies and stuff like that, people who would actually not benefit from Medicare for All. And it's them being a conglomerate along with media companies and getting the fellow like elites to ask these types of misleading
Yeah.
questions.
Well, there's one, I don't know much about the whole Venezuela thing, but Alaska seems like it's doing pretty fucking well, right? Alaska is like a good
I don't know too much about
community.
Alaska, so I don't want to
me
comment
either.
too heavily. And I only learned about the dividend from watching videos on Andrew Yang.
Gotcha,
He talks about it a lot, but the fact that they've had a UBI essentially for 40 years.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right. He does talk about
and it's very popular there.
Yeah.
That, you know, it just makes me realize like, oh, the opposition to this is a little bit disingenuous.
Yeah, well, that makes
seems like.
perfect sense. I was just going to say that Venezuela, from just some things that I've seen, is like in a just not a good state right now. Like it's just not doing well.
Well, what's interesting about Venezuela, on top of what I've talked about, is, you know, we started applying economic sanctions in the mid 2000s under Bush, and you know, every place that gets sanctioned by the most powerful economy on earth, they're not going to be doing well. So it's tough to say, are they not doing well because of socialism, or are they not doing well because of the economic sanctions? So it's my position that, you know, we should just stop sanctioning Venezuela, engage in full trade. And that way, if they do fail, we know it's because of the socialism, not because of us.
Gotcha. Well, it's a good point. I like I said, I don't know too much about it. I just know people talk about how they're eating rats there, and any place where they're eating rats, not
you know,
good.
one of the books we're going to talk about today, Management of Savagery by Max Blumenthal. You know, he's a kind of a independent journalist, and he went down to Venezuela, and he went into one of their grocery stores, and there was chicken, there was pork, there was beef. Like,
So you think it's a lot of bullshit? People talking a lot of bullshit?
Yeah, I do actually. I don't know how much I should really trust Max. You know, maybe he went to a specific grocery store that was meant for like the rich people or something. But, you know, we know that the corporate media lies about WMDs in Iraq. They lied about Russiagate. They've lied about
100%.
everything. So I know we don't trust them.
Yeah.
How much do I trust Max?
He seems
tough
like
to say.
I liked him.
He doesn't seem like a bad guy to me,
Yeah, he
but
totally
you know,
seemed
neither
cool.
does Jake Tapper when you look at him. So,
Yeah.
you know, I just want to call out the people that I know are bad, and the people that I don't know about. You know, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm just gonna say I'm not 100%
No, that's good.
either way on him.
That's good. Do you? So what do you? We have. Do you want to talk about, since we kind of touched on it, management of savagery, or would you rather talk about Dr. Zuboff?
Let's go into surveillance capitalism first.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I wanted to ask you. So
Okay.
I watched the video, and like, God, really interesting stuff. Scary as fuck. Like, if you really think about it, like we were saying earlier, the Pokemon Go thing. Like, but before, I was a little like muddy on exactly, and there probably isn't a way to just define it exactly. But how would you define surveillance capitalism?
So when we're talking about surveillance capitalism, the way I understand it is it's these big social media tech giants who are essentially, you know, stealing our information with your permission, those things that you never read, you know, the EULA whatevers.
No one looks at any.
No one looks at them, you know. But so they're essentially, you know, stealing it, and they're profiting off of it. They're selling it to third parties. They're building models to predict our behavior, and they're selling those predictions off. And that's kind of how I understand surveillance capitalism. It's because, you know, Google, their whole motto was do no evil or don't be evil or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, all the services they've started providing since the search engine, and this started kicking in about 2008-ish, you know, Gmail, Google Earth. So they read all of your emails. Even if you have like one of those high-tech, like encrypted emails, like a dark mail, and you're emailing someone with a Gmail account, they're reading your email that you're sending them. And they're using it to build their models better and better and better, but they don't give you anything for that. They just take it from you with your permission. But, you know, did we really give them permission if we don't understand the true nature of what's happening?
Yeah.
And why I think surveillance capitalism is so dangerous is because of kind of the, how'd you say it? The just the connections between things like the CIA and the NSA and Google and Facebook. You know, we saw Eric Schmidt, I think he's on the board of directors. He was one of the founders of Google. He was on Hillary Clinton's team during the 2016 campaign. So we know Google's not totally impartial to this type of thing. And we know how corrupt Hillary Clinton is. So it's like, how big of a jump from that to Google just handing stuff to the CIA?
I mean, is that happening now?
I think it is. And, we can look at other companies like Amazon. Jeff Bezos is on the board of some Pentagon board. And we know that most of his money does not come from Amazon.com the way you and I know it. You and I know this friendly corporation that, even though it exploits the hell out of its workers, even though they have an AI that essentially can fire their workers. This came out, I think, like a couple days ago. They have an AI that watches the workers, and if they start taking too long to do the things or they get off task, they can just be fired through an algorithm.
Really?
Yeah. So this is very real. And the thing is, the Fourth Amendment, so the whole Constitution, let me go back a little bit.
Take another shot after that.
Okay. Yeah, let me do that too. This is tea and whiskey, by the way.
Yeah.
So the whole Constitution, the premise is these are the things the government can do. It's not like how maybe like a European government is, where their constitutions forbid them from certain things. Our Constitution is supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to be, these are the only things the government can do. And in the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment is each citizen should be secure in their papers. So what does that mean when you look at the actual language of it? What does that mean in our context? It means we should be secure in our data and our information. The government should not be collecting our data. But so the way they've gotten around it is Google gets it, Facebook gets it, Amazon gets it, and then through their partnerships, the government gets it. So it's just this way around the Fourth Amendment for them.
God. Well, but the question, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of people don't think about this in their day-to-day life. Everyone has their fucking iPhone sitting here. Like with the location,
I have an iPhone on me and they're listening to it right now.
And what about, and just when you said that you're listening, I have a Google Home right over there. That's literally,
so you've bugged your own home.
I mean, what is like, it's crazy. It can drive you mad if you sit here and think about it, but
yeah, all the different ways they're just trying to get at you.
Yeah. And when Dr. Zuboff talked about Pokemon Go and how it's like similar to Google ads, how Pokemon Go restaurants, and maybe I don't know if you know more in detail about it, but
not really.
I know it's crazy. She was mentioning that restaurants would set up these places where you can battle your Pokemon or whatever to drive traffic through the doors. And no one is sitting here.
And that's just, I mean, that's like a business opportunity for them. I'm not overly worried about Pokemon Go of all things. Like
that's where it'll get you though. The shit that you're not overly worried about.
I guess that's true. That is a good point. But, the whole thing with Pokemon Go was like, it's supposed to help them understand like people moving around and the topology of the cities and stuff. And it was just a business opportunity for them. They can get all of us to be, just looking for Pokemon, looking for gym battles. And then,
but we're like fucking robots sitting here. Like we're being manipulated. You can think of it that way. Like no one has any idea.
That's exactly what it is. Right? They are manipulating you because they'll put, they'll basically sell the ability to put like a Pokemon gym at your gym, at your restaurant. And then people have to go to your restaurant, or people will be more likely to go to your restaurant because they're playing this free game.
God, I had no idea. I didn't play Pokemon Go, but either. It's like, I get it. I mean, I guess you could argue from the business perspective, like that's fucking cool.
Yeah,
like this is a cool way.
Honestly, like Pokemon Go, like that, it makes sense to me. It's not overly intrusive. It's a way for Google to make money that isn't evil. So I don't mind it too much, that particular thing. But there are, the things that they do that I do kind of mind.
Like, what are some things that maybe
like the reading
people
of the
don't
emails,
know about?
the partnerships with the Democratic Party, and regardless of what you think about either party, I worry about one of the largest tech companies on earth partnering with the Chinese Communist Party, just like I do the American Democratic Party.
Yeah. I'm glad. It's good to hear you. It's good to hear you say that.
Yeah. I mean, it's important that we, acknowledge like, hey, this isn't like a partisan issue. This isn't like a thing. It's just, or it's not like a left-right thing. It's like there's a different axis. Like we all see the left-right divide, the timeline or whatever, and then we've seen the other one where there's like an authoritarian, libertarian axis through the middle.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch more axes to understand politics around. But, it's important to not get sucked into either side and always take into account the other side.
I'm with you 100% on that. So like, I don't know, like this question, it's such a broad question, but it's something that when I really think about the internet, like what the fuck, this infinite thing that's connecting all of us with all this crazy information all the time. What do you think, how do you regulate that? Like what's the government's role with the internet really? Because
it's hard to say, because if you wanted to stop something like that from happening before it happens, it would take truly the level of intrusiveness that the government has.
It's like what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, to truly stop it. One of the things that I thought would be super easy to regulate would just be to force companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon to put all their algorithms out in the open on, so that, not that so that we can all go look at them, but so that the relevant experts can examine it and be like, hey, this is probably going to be a problem. You're trying to maximize people's attention span on your network. People have other stuff to do. We don't like that. And it would open up this like pretty easy to implement regulation would open up a lot of social pressure on them in the way that, Facebook can kind of avoid now, because they can claim, oh, this algorithm is a trade secret. And fair enough, it is hard to code out something like that.
That's what I was about to say, is like, put all your shit on GitHub, Google, just get it all up there. But then people can then copy them. I mean, right? That's probably why they don't, right? I guess.
But also, like, I'm not so sure that that's a bad thing. There's so many different social networks like minds.com and different types of social networks who are totally open source. They have all of it out there in the open for everybody.
Are you on Minds?
I'm on Minds. I don't go on it that often, but that's probably because there's not an algorithm that's trying to maximize my time on it,
Yeah,
so I go on it and I'll look at it and stuff, and then I'll get off of it. But that's how we want our social media. I want to just maybe flick through a couple of my friends' feeds and then send them a meme or two and then get off. I don't want to be sitting up at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, just flicking through like a zombie. Or 100%. I don't want it to be the first thing I look at in the morning.
So you think it would be that's a really good idea, honestly, like really sitting here thinking about it. They're never going to do it probably, but to make it open source, right? On to make it open source. Like if Google would make all of the algorithms open source, you could open up the doors to people that could come in that otherwise would never have had the opportunity to come in, look at these things, analyze it from a different perspective, and possibly
honestly, it wouldn't hurt Facebook and Google that much to
at
put
this
their
point.
Stuff out
It
there,
wouldn't, because they're so big.
What makes an algorithm truly powerful is not necessarily the intricate details of the algorithm, although it's important. It's the quantity and the quality of the data that they're getting that makes the algorithms as powerful as they are.
Very good point. Very, very true. Yeah, because you and me, if we decided to start some social media and copy Google,
if I just
wouldn't fucking matter.
Copied Facebook's, their source code on how their website looks, and then I changed some stuff. I called it Bookface instead of Facebook. It wouldn't be as powerful.
No, not at all.
So
I would be the first person to use it, though.
Well, and then this brings us to what we kind of wanted to talk about when we were on our way back here. I wanted to just kind of share some things that people can do to kind of protect themselves, or kind of just other companies who are doing cool things like search engines, like social media, that aren't being manipulative. So one of the big things that makes Google as powerful as it is the Google Chrome web browser. And good on them for putting that open source. I want to definitely commend them for that. That's awesome.
I'm using Google Chrome right now as we speak.
Calling you out on it. But what they do is essentially take all your web browsing history, and they just take it and they use that in their models, and then they sell it to other businesses so that they can target you better. So what I use is a browser called Brave, which is Brave, Brave. They are it's based on the source code of Google Chrome. So it's actually very similar, but they don't track you. They don't,
really?
and they purposefully cut out ads. It's an amazing web browser.
Wow.
When their homepage, when you first open them, it'll actually share stats like, oh, we've blocked this many ads, we've blocked this many trackers, we've blocked this many whatever. And then and what I think is the best part about it is it'll tell you how many hours or how much time you've saved not loading up all these trackers, all these ads. Because that's part of what makes Google Chrome powerful, but also kind of slow, is that they're loading up all these different cookies, trackers, whatever. So if you can just cut out that.
Wow. Well, yeah.
Awesome.
So everybody use Brave. That's cool. I'm
Brave
gonna download
browser.
it.
Shout out to them.
Is it
awesome?
Can you get it on like Mac App Store, or is it just download it like normal?
I don't know. I have it on my PC.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure how it works.
You don't have a Mac? Are you not? You're not an Apple user?
I mean, I have an iPhone, but I wasn't going to shell out like $2,000 for a Facebook machine.
Not to like throw things too off topic, but do you think Apple has done a good job with like protecting privacy and all that?
Tough to say.
Because I'm a huge Apple. I have a MacBook. I have an iPhone.
Dude,
I love Apple. I want you to say, Apple is great.
They're not the worst. I like Apple more than I like Google and Facebook. When there was that the San Bernardino shooter here in California not that long ago, they got his iPhone. The FBI did, and they wanted Apple to open it for them. They wanted Apple to, I think, create a way of backdooring for them. And
they didn't do
Apple
it, right?
said no. Tim Cook came out and said, hey, that would cause a huge privacy and security vulnerability. And I think he did it because it would hurt his business if it did anything, or if anything actually did come of that.
Yeah.
But he couched it in this rhetoric of, I want to protect privacy and stuff like that. And then it later turned out the CIA and the FBI already had a backdoor into Apple phones. So they didn't even need it. They were just trying to cover their tracks, their ways and means. But so I don't hate Apple.
Well, you just validated my fanboy state with Apple.
All right. If you want to keep paying extra money for the virus protection, personally, I'll buy a PC and Norton or something like that.
So I have like I was telling you, I have some notes here, and I just wanted to ask you, because we're like really.
We're just kind of freestyling.
Yeah, we're freestyling, which is awesome. But I did want to ask you this specifically, which is, how is it possible really to protect privacy with the continuous advancement of technology into artificial intelligence, AGI? Like, wouldn't it actually be a good thing to get rid of this idea of privacy in order to like advance even us as human beings? Like as humans, right? Don't we want to get to a place where we don't fucking care about privacy?
It could. I've heard arguments for that. Just put everyone's bank statements up online, make sure all of our financial transactions are available for everyone to see. And that way, if anyone is doing anything shady, we can all be like, hey, you're doing something real shady there.
Yeah.
And so, there is an element of secrecy that is dangerous, but, I don't think it's that crazy of a thing to want privacy.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so at all. I know I like having my alone time and my privacy, but I guess, and Joe Rogan, I'm a huge fan of Joe Rogan, obviously.
Totally.
He often says this, and I resonate with it, which is, we were talking about it earlier, actually, of like, when artificial intelligence becomes conscious or whatever, it's why the fuck do we need humans?
Yeah.
Why do we even need you? Like when artificial intelligence gets to that place where it becomes conscious, it becomes aware of itself, it can create other consciousness, whatever. Yeah, why would it even need humans? Like you were saying something crazy interesting earlier about
so we brought up the idea of like the deepfakes, and that's what I considered like a narrow intelligence kind of vulnerability towards humanity.
Yeah.
AGI though, if it had its own desires, its own whatever, it would be, it wouldn't need the earth the way that the humans do. God. So there's no reason, if an AGI is truly just self-interested and it only cares about not getting shut off by the humans, a very easy thing for it to do to maintain its its security basically is to just use whatever power we've given it, whatever purpose we built it for, just use that to kind of nudge us and off a cliff, essentially. So it, I don't want to get overly dystopian about it, but there is a future where an AGI could just keep pushing us towards global warming, towards nuclear war, anything to get rid of us, and then it will be free to pursue its own goals out in the open.
Yeah, well, this is such a high concept like idea. It's crazy. Like when you really like think about it, it kind of just hurts my brain. But like,
yeah, it hurts my heart too.
I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, it's like my question would be like, how do you mitigate ethics and values with artificial intelligence? It's such a weird thing. Values, isn't it just a human thing?
Yeah,
the values.
How do you define morality?
How do you define morality?
Install that in an AGI that isn't connected to the physical world the way we are.
And how, when artificial intelligence, when there's some kind of consciousness that's created artificially, which I'm with Joe Rogan when I say, well, how is artificial intelligence that's created by us different than you and me, our consciousness? Like if something becomes self-aware and able to continuously think and generate ideas, however you want to define it, suffer, I guess. Sam Harris, he talks about consciousness, I think it's Sam Harris that says that, right? That consciousness, you can define, like a way to know that something is conscious is if it can suffer, right? Doesn't he say that? Or someone says that.
That doesn't sound like a bad way of defining consciousness.
Like if you can suffer,
know if he said it, though.
You're conscious. And if artificial intelligence ever gets that place, how would it? How could artificial intelligence suffer? I mean, it's such a weird,
I don't know.
It's just such a weird concept. Like
it is. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Right. If it creates,
is it's essentially equations and numbers that are trying to model what happens to us physically. Like our brain is, just chemistry and electricity that's moving back and forth, and it's generating whatever the brain does generate. But AGI wouldn't be a physical process the way we are. It would just be I guess the best guess at like a mathematical way of understanding the physical processes that are happening in the brain.
Man, we could
deep topic.
I mean, yeah, we could go into it. We could go into AGI so much. I mean, or any artificial intelligence stuff. Like, I'm curious to ask you, I think we touched on it a tiny little bit before, but what are your thoughts on like simulation theory?
Okay. So we have the deepfake idea, right?
Yeah.
We have VR.
Yeah.
We have all this different stuff. We have quantum computers coming down the pipe soon. There is going to be a time in the future where we can make a reality that looks, feels, smells, tastes like a real reality, and it's indistinguishable. So if we can do that theoretically in the future, who's to say we're not already in it? We're not already there. If there's truly going to be a time where technology is so powerful that we can't tell, who's to say we're not already there? And I don't know. I get to that point and I'm like, all right, I don't know how much more I want to get into it. Because you're just going to go off, you're going to just drive yourself mad.
Yeah, it's very, I definitely drive myself mad thinking about that. I think, and I've said this before, but I believe reality is a simulation, and it's a shitty way to define it. Cause the way that I think about this isn't that like this is a computer and we're avatars in some computer, but I think of it as, what is the difference really? If you boil things down to like some fundamental reality, what is the difference between science, physics, materialism? What is the difference between that and a like video game that's generating avatars in some world? Because science really, if you boil it down to like the most basic way to understand science, it's math, it's numbers, it's math, it's data. right?
Yeah.
It's really no different.
Taking evidence and creating a model. It's just, do you do it in archaeology? Do you do it in sociology?
Right.
But it's all the same.
Yeah.
It's all just the process of discovery, essentially.
God, it's so wild to think about it. I'm with Joe Rogan sometimes. I'm like, he's right about his whole, and I'm sure other people have this theory that we're here to create artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
We're like the people where humans are creating artificial intelligence, and we're like the caterpillars in the cocoon.
We're going to essentially just create our own God since...
And I actually wanted to ask you, because you were talking about like what you were saying earlier about deepfakes and how do we know if Bernie Sanders, like if this deepfake
if those
Sanders,
politicians you see on TV are really real.
Yeah,
and then it like fits into the simulation theory.
It does. But what do you think about...
I don't know. It's like you can't logically figure your way out of it. And I think of nihilism the same way. You can't logically figure your way out of it. You just kind of have to have faith that this is base reality.
Right? You do. You have to, like it is, you do have to have faith. But I wanted to ask you this just popped into my mind. We talked about it earlier for a little bit before we recorded, and it's such a broad topic, but when artificial intelligence does get to that place where it starts, like even things like the Neuralink that Elon Musk talks about with creating something where you can connect your thoughts to the internet.
To like a machine or other brains or something.
It's wild to think about that. But what do you think politics are going to look like at that point? Like
when the Neuralink is available?
Because at that point, if we really get to a place where we can insert a chip into our brains and allow our brains to connect to the internet. I mean, this is my archaic understanding of what he's talking about, but privacy won't exist. I mean, what would even be the point of privacy? If
brains will just, because brains are just electricity. And if you can just make the electricity flow between the brains, I have zero idea of what would happen.
Right.
It could be a dystopia, or it could be like, all brains are connected. We all have the same understanding. There's not, we communicate through language, but when I say something like a Democrat, so the idea that is forming in my head, it might not be the same idea in your head.
Exactly.
When you hear that.
Yeah.
So if we could just connect the brain and get rid of language, it could open up a whole new realm of possibility for just understanding one another.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a good thing. Like you could truly empathize with someone. Truly.
Yeah.
Like you could truly
in a way that we really cannot do today.
Yeah.
So there's the utopian view that I'm reluctant to kind of think about, but there's also different animes and shows that have explored the idea of being able to upload your brain directly to the internet. And, there's ways that could be dystopian just as easily. And, we have this new technology of smartphones, and, we all thought it was going to be a utopia, and it turns out, now we're all addicted to, we all have a slight gambling addiction to our phone. And, so who really knows what a technology like that is going to do. I will say that I do have a lot of faith in Elon Musk, much, much more than any other oligarch that I know of, because his OpenAI program, or not the program, the organization, they came up with a natural language model that they thought was so powerful and could write essentially articles so convincingly human that they decided this is probably too dangerous to put out right now. And so that's what gives me a lot of faith in a lot of the projects he's doing. Neuralink, I know the least about of a lot of this, so it's really tough to say what are the eventual implications. But right now,
I mean, that the way that I kind of the way that I think about it, it's weird because we have our phones, and our phones can access the internet like so quickly. You can pull out your phone and look up information, and it'll almost be like putting your phone in your brain, and then you're able it's crazy. Like it's crazy to think about how the only change really is the instantaneous ability to connect to whatever it is that you're researching, which I guess would change.
Yeah. I mean, I think like once we get to the point where we can upload brains to the internet or upload information, because information can be represented in the same way that electricity gets represented. And so there is that theory that like we'll just be able to upload books straight into our head or information straight in. And so it kind of just throws everything we know about human culture today into question. And so that's why I love talking to you and talking to Chris, and maybe one day I'll get to talk to Hunter too. And
we will soon. He's going to talk about politics. We're going to do
it. We'll get you too, Hunter.
We'll get you.
What was I saying? So it's important to be asking these kinds of crazy questions, and to there's that saying like, oh, look at who you can't criticize, and then you'll understand your situation. So that's what I'm trying to do by coming on here and talking about this stuff, is just asking the questions that people are scared to ask, don't know to ask, and then just trying to learn from that.
It's so interesting. I mean, everything we're talking about, I find it so engaging and interesting, and it's you have to bounce ideas off of someone else sometimes. Like you just get trapped in your mind, but
because that's how we got here, we still rely on each other. And I think it's going to be important that we keep that aspect of society intact as much as we possibly can, because as soon as, the more we isolate ourselves, like, if you wanted to get directions somewhere before the internet, you'd have to find someone and ask them. And, we would rely and trust one another. Now, if you need directions, it's just Google Earth. If you need to know anything about anything, you don't go to your uncle who knows stuff. You go to Wikipedia.
Very true.
And so it creates less of a need for each other. And so it kind of makes me worried about just how much we're getting isolated.
Well, it actually, I mean, we didn't even talk about talking about this, but I do want to ask you what your opinion is on that, because I think that is a really, really like important thing. And it's something I've been thinking about lately, which is like, and we did talk about it before, the algorithms, the social media algorithms that are causing us to seek negative interactions, right? Like that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But
it's not that the algorithms are purposefully pushing that. They're trying to maximize just your time on the platform.
Yeah.
But they've found out that there's a psychological exploit that humans will respond better to negative information. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it. Because as you're coming up, if you're not concerned about the negative stuff, then you're just going to get sideswiped by it.
100%.
So it's totally understandable that humans have that kind of exploit. And that's why I think it's really like the government's job to say, all right, you're exploiting like a very well-known aspect of human psyche. Stop.
Mm-hmm. So you do think the government should get involved in trying to regulate social media?
In some way. I like I said, I like the idea of at least forcing Instagram and Facebook to put their architectures publicly out there, because it won't hurt their business too much. Obviously, like maybe there'll be some more clones of Instagram and Facebook, but
at this
we're supposed
point,
to be a capitalist nation. We're supposed to encourage competition, not
100%. That's a good idea. I haven't even really. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that.
Yeah,
just making open source.
Yeah, force them to put it open source. Then
that's a really good idea. But I just wanted to touch on Casey Neistat. Huge fan of Casey Neistat. Not sure if you watch his stuff or
I'm not familiar.
Huge fan of Casey Neistat. He's made some videos recently on social media addiction, and it makes me think about this addiction to the validation that we get from social media. And what you were just saying a second ago about the isolation, almost like social media has crept in and made people not need other humans. And then the more that it advances and the more artificial intelligence gets involved, like it's almost seeable and also with things like fucking like simulations of sex.
Oh yeah, like sex bots and all that.
At some point, it seems like it would be very possible that and right now there's a problem with young men, depression, anxiety, isolation,
young women
suicide.
Too. Everybody it's suffering from it in some other way.
Right. And it seems like a part of that is that social media has come in and allowed people to not actually need this kind of interaction with each other, because you can get your likes from social media. And it seems like it could get worse. And it could get to a point with artificial intelligence.
It's already bad. I mean, Andrew Yang talks about this on his on the campaign trail. Our life expectancy has been going down
because of suicide,
for the past 4 years. suicide and opioids. God. So it's like, what are we doing to ourselves and we're just allowing this to happen because some people are making money? What are we doing?
What do you think that is about? I mean, what do you think that is, if you just had to throw out a theory?
So here, I've been thinking about this part for the past couple of weeks. When we look at the capitalism, just broad, it started off a little bit, maybe in like the 50s and 60s, everybody was doing well. There was a lot of competition. There was a lot of businesses, but now we look around, we have half the number of businesses or the number of employers that we do today. There's half the number of winners who are winning exponentially more than they were 50 years ago. And we're seeing the same thing play out on social media. I'm on social media, you're on social media. We don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, but there are, women who their whole Instagram is just their ass.
Yeah.
Or and they're essentially the Jeff Bezos of Instagram likes, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
when you get these like impressionable teenage boys and girls on Instagram, and they can see the Jeff Bezos of Instagram getting hundreds of thousands of likes. They have comments on everything. And you put up a photo that you think is great, and maybe it is better than their photo, but you're not getting the kind of attention or whatever that they're getting. So it creates like a really like just not great feeling in a lot of people. And so, we really need to be paying attention to what is happening on social media, because it is, people try to say, like people like Dave Rubin will say Twitter's not real life, but it is real life. I disagree with that completely. Yeah. It is as real to them as everything else.
Yeah.
So, the suicide rate that's being driven up, I think it's almost 100% because of social media. And
it's a grand statement, but
maybe I shouldn't say 100%, but it's gotta be a big factor.
I think that I do believe that, because we've talked about this. I've talked about it on other episodes. Just the more that I think about this, I'm sure there's someone that is way smarter than me that's talked about this, but the more that I think about this, the more that I think once human beings became aware of the future, we evolved to the point where we are aware of the future. Our minds started evolving to that point where we could think about the future, think about the past, analyze both things. And it became an existential crisis from the moment we're born, because now we realize if you're a nihilist going down that path, and once you can realize the future and everything, you realize I'm going to die. And what's the point? Like, what's the point? And so social media to me definitely seems like it came in, and it makes perfect sense that it's the most popular thing in the fucking world. It came in and it provides people with validation. Yeah. It's all about the validation. And it's like what you're saying, these women, men too. If you're an Instagram model and all of your validation that makes you feel good about yourself comes from Instagram, what would you do if one day Instagram completely fucking shut down and you didn't have that anymore? What would you do? How would you feel? What would you do at that point? Would you be able to feel good about yourself and go talk to someone and be confident? Or is it all just coming from your likes on Instagram?
From your phone, essentially.
Right? It's a wild thing.
What's actually like kind of interesting to think about is that, or just as an example of this, YouTube, the views that the public will see on your videos, it'll say like maybe it's a couple hundred views or something. And the views that you get on behind the scenes as a creator, they're not always the same. YouTube will manipulate the public view of what they see to influence what will be popular.
Wow.
And so
I didn't know that.
There is a future where, Instagram could start doing the same thing. If they want someone to be popular, they could just put likes on them.
Wow.
So I don't know. It's such a huge problem. The way that it is, the scrolling aspect of it,
it just
the likes,
perfectly feeds our need for validation. Perfectly. Like it just completely fulfills it. And Mark, I don't know. Did you watch the movie The Social Network?
Yeah.
Like I love that movie. I'm an Aaron Sorkin fan. But It's just like the way that it's portrayed, and it kind of like, I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't know Mark Zuckerberg. I have no idea, but like,
I have no idea.
This like, it's funny the way that he's portrayed in that movie, and the way that some people talk about him is he's kind of like a nerd, like he was antisocial, a nerd, and then he invented this social media because he wasn't part of the popular class at Harvard. And he fulfilled his own need for that validation with social media.
Yeah.
And then it blew up because we all want that because we're fucking human. And what's the point of living if you don't believe in God or whatever, right? Why are we doing this? You know?
That is the question, right? Why do anything?
It fulfills that void that we can have in us for needing a reason to continue to live, right? It's just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And then the more technology advances and stuff, it's like, it freaks me out. Like and then when you introduced me to freaking surveillance capitalism, which is like, God, what, like it's a weird,
because it's all, it being connected to the government and all that. It's like, it just opens up so many opportunities for individual politicians to start to influence social media. And it just sets us up so easily, so perfectly for the next Donald Trump to just truly take over the social media. And then, when we're not used to talking to one another out on the street, and when, instead of, as someone's walking by, instead of looking at them, hey, what's going on, man? Even if you don't know them, we all now, and I notice this with myself and with everyone, I don't want to call anyone out. We'll look away from each other. We'll be like, oh God, like, just look at my phone, like pretend to do anything but look at the other person. And so if some of that stuff starts being able to be manipulated by politicians or intelligence agencies or whatever, what next? What are they going to do? Like, it's just such a vulnerability in our society and to each of us individually.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy zooming out and trying to look at it from like a really big perspective. But I wanted to ask you, we talked about this before, just because I'm curious, because I'm like, I don't get too big into politics. And I think that's a good part of our dynamic when we have these conversations is I'm probably coming from more of the average person that hears stuff here and there. And
it's so important, I think, for me to hear it from you or to hear your questions, because, I'll watch just videos all day on something like that. And it's so hard on the internet to tell what's true, what's real, what's not. So having somebody who isn't that knowledgeable or whatever to just ask questions and to help ground me and to give me another perspective, I think is so important. So I just want to encourage everybody who is considers themselves an expert in something to remain open to, the questions of amateurs or whatever.
For sure. And I wanted to ask you why, I guess 2 questions. Why or how did you become involved in wanting, or why do you like to be involved in politics? And then why is it important?
So obviously nobody likes getting involved in politics. You're not going to get any direct benefit from it. You're not going to...
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to get involved in it. You don't get a direct benefit from it. It is work to try to understand some of this stuff and parse through, okay, what did they mean when they said that or this? Are they truly on our side, or are they just trying to put on a show to make us get our votes? But it's important to focus on politics, to understand politics, or at least enough of us to do it, because by the time things have already gone wrong in a very serious way, it is too fucking late. We need to be involved now. We need to be at our children's school boards. We need to be at our city council meetings. We need to be calling our politicians, senators and congresspeople. And we need to be running ourselves and just doing more in politics to make sure that, hey, this society is running the way all of us want it to. Because if it's not, it's only going to be run for the powerful. And then, they can run it a certain way because they've got themselves insulated just through the sheer amount of money they have. And so, if the economy turns a certain way, it might be bad for all of us. Like, actually, NAFTA is the perfect example of this. Bill Clinton passes NAFTA, and the capitalist class or the ownership class basically just gives all the jobs or not all, but a lot of jobs of Americans out to people in more desperate situations. And, I'm not sad that people who are in very desperate situations got jobs. I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome. But the fact that there was no recourse at all for people in Texas, in Iowa, in New Hampshire, or not New Hampshire, like Michigan, Minnesota, that is what gave us Donald Trump. I mean, Andrew Yang talks about this too all the time. The fact that the Rust Belt is the Rust Belt now, those are the swing states. Those are the states Donald Trump needed to win.
Yeah.
So if we were just more involved in our politics, if we were just more involved in everything, we might not have a Donald Trump president right now. And regardless of what you think about how he's doing, I mean, well, not regardless, he's doing a bad I think.
Yeah, I actually want to ask you about that. Like, what, if you don't mind going into, like, why don't you like Donald Trump? There's a lot of people that like Donald Trump.
There are a lot of people who do like him. I think it's something like 30% is like the solid base of his right now. And I think people like him because he hit on the same type of anti-establishment rhetoric that Barack Obama did. There are people in the Rust Belt, and this is a well-documented phenomena. There are people who voted for Obama twice, in 2008 and 12, who then turned around and voted for Trump. So how do you go from voting for the first black president to voting for another racist president? It's the anti-establishment rhetoric. That's what I think they had in common. And that's why I think people liked Trump. And that's why I was first kind of like, oh, okay, maybe Trump won't be that bad. He has totally reversed course on that anti-establishment stuff. When you look at who he's surrounded himself with, the team he's chosen for himself, it is essentially, the Bush family, neocons like Elliot Abrams. It's people like John Bolton, who was the architect of the Iraq War. So when I say he's doing a bad job, it's not that I even like dislike him that much. It's that he's really brought people back from a place where they should never have been in politics. These are people who are so anti-American at their core. People like John Bolton, who are just open for war at all times, and who, I mean, this is going to get even more controversial, but will protect Israel even over Americans.
Yeah, I have no idea who. Like,
I don't want to get too involved in that right now, but so I kind of do want to get involved.
No,
in that
do
now.
it, man. Like, I think it's. I want to just get this perspective because my perspective that I come from is that coming from more of a like not being too involved in politics. I gotta give it to Trump that he got me more involved in politics.
That is something good I can say about it. There are people who are a lot more interested in going to their city council meetings and talking to their Congress people.
He definitely did that. And also he to me, something that it feels like he did was kind of like, it's like he just, it's like he opened up a new door of pointing out the fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? It's almost like he came in, and because he's like this TV reality guy, and he's kind of like, he's not some like, one thing I was thinking about this earlier actually is I think a reason that people who voted for Donald Trump, maybe people more in like southern states, middle America, whatever, they like him because he doesn't make them feel like fucking idiots. And people like Hillary and Obama,
Hillary Clinton definitely did.
They can come across as pretentious and almost so egotistical that they think they're better than everyone else.
I can't even imagine how fucking stupid the Hillary Clinton consultants went on her 2016 campaign. There is an anti-establishment fervor in the country, and it's been here. It was evident from Barack Obama's campaign. Barack Obama wiped the floor with Hillary Clinton, not because he's black, but because he said, I'm going to have the most transparent administration in history. I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. I'm going to end the torture program. And he did none of those things. He expanded the wars. He tortured Chelsea Manning. Edward Snowden is in exile in Russia because of him and his administration. Julian Assange has been in the Ecuadorian embassy, essentially a prisoner for 7 years because of Barack Obama's administration. So that just pushed it to the next level. You know, people didn't like the Iraq War starting in 2004, 6, 5, 6, whatever. You know, people turned against it pretty quick. And so when Barack Obama said, hey, I'm going to close Guantanamo, I'm going to be transparent, you know, people really liked it. And then he gave us 8 years. I mean, he was essentially Bush too. He was just another Bush but he talked nicer to, you know, Californians like me, he talked nicer, I guess. Texans, maybe they feel different about it.
No.
But so he was just a complete flip. And I think that really opened the door for any kind of anti-establishment rhetoric. And Donald Trump was one of the only people who would really hit on it. And you know, credit to Steve Bannon. I think he was the one who really recognized that in Trump's campaign and got him to start using things like drain the swamp, which he never meant. He admitted I think like after he won that he didn't even know what drain the swamp meant. He said it and people responded well to it. And it reminded me of what Jordan Peterson says about Hitler. Like Hitler he would feel the crowd, right? That's what he says about it. And so you see Trump at these rallies and he's just saying what his base wants. Yeah. And they're kind of feeding into him and directing him in a way.
Yeah, yeah. So well, that's the perspective.
I forget what your original question was. I was just wondering, like, I was small rant.
No, that's awesome. Like, I love getting that perspective. I didn't know that you're not. It doesn't sound like you're a huge fan of Obama. Like you just
no. And what I wanted to say about Hillary Clinton was that, you know, her consultants are so fucking stupid that they didn't hit on the anti-establishment thing. They said, or they didn't want to even go to the people and be like, hey, here's what we're gonna do for you. Yeah. They said, I'm with her. The voters are supposed to be with her. Why is it her turn to be president? Is it just because she's been there for 25 years? So, you know, these corporate Democrats who are trying to say this stuff, if they go against Trump in 2020, they're going to lose just like she did. So people like Joe Biden, who just jumped into the race, there's no fucking way he's going to win. Trump's going to wipe the floor with him. Yeah. He was in the Obama administration too. Like, he's just as much they're not just as much, but he's, you know, involved. He's a corporatist. He just had his first fundraiser. He announced he raised the most money out of all the Democrats running. And where did he get it? He had his first fundraiser at the lobbyist of like a Comcast lobbyist's house. There were people from, you know, just all different types of like health insurance industries and stuff like that. So if Joe Biden wins, I'm going to call it now. If Joe Biden wins, it's the end of net neutrality and we're not getting Medicare for all. God. But either way, I don't think we would get there because I think Trump would smash him. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And that's another point to bring up that I don't know, but I do know from what I've heard people say, and like the feeling is that Donald Trump kind of like, he was like the outsider. He was the underdog, which is another reason why people like him. He wasn't funded by lobbyists, right? Like he kind of just did the fucking thing himself. And I think, you know, like that, I think it's unfortunate. Like I have such a weird perspective of Donald Trump. Like there are times when I just don't know what to think about him. Like when you can't look someone in the eye and talk to them and ask them questions. And then you see shit like there's a video on YouTube of him calling someone who was terminally ill with cancer. And he called this guy and talked to him. And it was like just this insanely sincere conversation that Donald Trump had with this guy who was going to die from cancer. It makes you think like, I have no fucking idea what to think, but I'm not into politics enough to like analyze it from a policy perspective. Like, what are the policies? Yeah. How's he doing there? Yeah, but and that's why. And most people, they do just kind of go off the personality and how they come off and stuff like that.
And it's crazy because there's a part of me that sees Donald Trump and like thinks, man, this guy is like the most narcissistic guy that I've ever. Totally. And I never respect that. Like, I just when someone is, you know, that like he seems like he gets offended really easily and he gets super defensive and he never takes responsibility.
Honestly, it's so funny to me that conservatives are the ones calling liberals snowflakes because
Donald Trump is a fucking snowflake.
Donald Trump is a snowflake, and you know, if it's just to be even meaner to conservatives, you know, if you criticize the war, if you criticize the police tactics, if you criticize stuff like that, they get so offended so quick.
It's true.
And it's like, wow, you guys are, you can keep calling me a libtard all you want, but
no, it's very true. It's very true. And it is true that Donald Trump is a snowflake, like how easily he gets defended or defensive about stuff. But it's just, and then just to just push back or to kind of get your opinion to play devil's advocate or whatever. How is Donald Trump racist? I've never heard him say anything racist.
So you have to look at the other effects that he's done. So you kind of have to go into the past with him. So he owns apartment buildings, right? And he was accused of encouraging his staff essentially to only allow white people in to his apartments. So they would put a C on people of color's applications so that everyone would know, don't even look at it, basically.
I didn't know that.
So there's that.
That's true? Or is that just an accusation?
That, I don't know all the details about it, so I don't want to be like, I know it. But, I know that was a thing. And then
you have to ask, was that Donald Trump or was that people working under him?
But you have to look at the most powerful person in the organization.
That's what you said.
They set
his
the
responsibility
tone for the whole organization.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And then, so there's that. There's the Mexicans are sending us their rapists and stuff. And I get that he meant like, they're sending us the gangs and stuff like that.
That's something that I've always wanted to ask someone about who like, I've always wanted to ask someone about that, because when I see people refer to him saying that as that's a racist thing to say, I don't think it's racist to say that. To me, it sounds like it was taken so out of context. To me, it sounds like he was saying more than they're all racist or they're all rapists. It sounded like he was saying, unfortunately, it's shitty for us in America because a lot of them are rapists, right? Like there's a lot of that going on. I don't know. It sounds like is that what he was saying?
I think that was
like the violence,
that's why I think
the
it
gangs,
was,
the like drug cartels, that kind of thing.
To say that, because the people who come over the border, yes, there are, narcos trying to bring drugs to the country, but there are just as many, probably way more, just legitimate refugees from violence who are fleeing our drug war that we exported to their country.
Well, see, that's
and
enlightening.
They're coming to our country, and then we're saying, all right, we're going to separate your family. We're going to take your kids. And the fact that they had that policy is not good. And the fact that they didn't care enough about these people who were fleeing violence in their home countries to keep track of their children means, to me, that you don't view them as human the way you would view like a European person as a human. Because if there was a migrant crisis in Europe and we were getting British people here, would we separate their families? Would we lose track of their children? I don't think there's any fucking way that would happen.
Who knows? I mean, who knows? If it was as often and it was like the same problem with drugs and violence and stuff, it's just like maybe, Mexico's right here. So it's so easy for that, like the actual like amount of stuff going on there. But that makes perfect sense. I always think, my perspective on like compassion. Like I think that definitely, maybe the way that I can agree with you is that he did a really fucking shitty job of communicating like what he maybe meant to say or whatever, like it just, he should have, it definitely was not a good way to say it. And then did he say it purposefully like that because he knew the people would resonate with? You know what I mean? You have to ask that question. Like,
honestly,
was that like purposeful?
I kind of think he does. And I mean, it's like, I don't think
is he smart enough for that?
To like purposefully be racist, but I think that he just doesn't, because this gets into the whole conversation about privilege, right?
Yeah,
like how
exactly.
Jordan Peterson and all these guys are always like, oh, privilege isn't real or whatever, or they criticize people who talk about it. But I think privilege is a very real phenomena, and I think a billionaire who inherited hundreds of millions of dollars from his parents is insulated from the world in a way that nobody else is.
It was only $1 million. It was only a small loan of $1 million.
That's actually not true.
Really?
Yeah, Matt Taibbi put out a big article actually, I don't know if it was Matt Taibbi. The New York Times did a big article about his money and his finances, and he's been a lifelong tax avoiding criminal his whole life. And he got a lot of money from his parents. He got a lot of help from them as far as business connections and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And I was listening to an economist talk about him. and he said that if Donald Trump had been given the amount of money that he was given, and instead of going into real estate, he just put it into an ETF, an electronically traded fund, and it just followed the market, he would actually be more wealthy than he is today. So it's kind of off topic about the racism thing, but it just kind of means like, oh, you're kind of a shitty business person.
No, well, and that's the other thing too that I think is not good is the like that aspect of not being transparent. You know, like that's not good. Like he said,
yeah, but I mean, none of them are transparent.
Right?
So how am I going to call him out for that? I'd have to go down the list of people before I got to him. So
you like Andrew Yang, right?
Yeah,
and I do too. Like I'm really enjoying listening to him talk, and I think what you like kind of he's doing, like he went on Joe Rogan's podcast and stuff.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
I think he has a good kind of opportunity here if you keep, because I feel like he's being pretty fucking authentic. He's like going on these podcasts, having these types of conversations. I'm
can tell he's not like focus group testing his like every sentence and every part of the speech is prim and polished. Like,
I really like him.
So many Q&As where people just ask him whatever, and
it
doesn't seem like they're plants.
Do you think that there's really a chance for him?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even remember the last like Asian person to run.
Right.
So it's like he's a first. So we'll see how that goes.
And it could work in his favor.
It could not. We'll see.
Yeah.
But he definitely is the person with his finger on the pulse, not of how people are how people are feeling, but what the actual problems are.
Yeah,
like Donald Trump. True. One of the reasons I think he's racist is, he sees the problems that were generated from NAFTA, but he's blaming the immigrants. And it's like, how are you getting one from the other? I don't see that. It seems like you're just kind of picking something to like scapegoat. Whereas Andrew Yang has actually looked at it and been like, oh, it was from NAFTA. It's because all your jobs are gone. And so you were desperate for anybody to say something about your job being, exported to Mexico or wherever. Yeah. And so,
makes sense. But could it be that rather than him being racist, he's just fucking nearly...
If it's not that he's racist, it's that he's so privileged that he doesn't understand their perspective of it.
And I actually think
that he doesn't have to understand the problem.
Yeah.
So he can... Because that's kind of what privilege does. It means that you don't have to really go understand it. You just can continue to exist as you are.
Yeah.
And so... I don't know. That's why I like Andrew Yang, though.
I like Andrew Yang a lot. But I think that
he understands it.
What you just said, I think is like actually a really insightful, like interesting thing to say, which is the confusion possibly between like someone who might be racist or someone who's just very privileged and they don't actually understand the struggles and the shit that people go through.
It's like they don't know that the drug war is racist because they don't suffer from it. They only see it as, oh, that's like illegal. You can't do that. Yeah. And that's our system. We say like, and so they don't understand how devastating stuff like the crack epidemic was in the 80s. So, that's just what privilege does. It insulates you from consequences.
What are your thoughts on, you said it a second ago, like Jordan Peterson, people talking about like the whole privilege doesn't exist, which I don't know that Jordan. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that was like a little.
I know what you mean. But what are your thoughts on that? Like the idea of it's completely take full ownership, like what Jocko Willink says. You're completely responsible. Like, like what are your thoughts on kind of privilege and taking ownership how much can we blame the economy and the shit that we might go through? Totally. I mean, like one thing that I say, and I was thinking about this earlier, is this innate, we kind of touched on a little bit, but this inclination that people have to kind of fall into the victim mentality. And to me, it seems like, well, we are victims because you didn't fucking choose to be born.
Yeah. You didn't choose, like if you were born in in West Virginia. Yeah. You didn't choose that.
You can, if you don't believe in privilege or whatever, okay, I can hear you out, but you have to draw the line there that like people who are born with Down syndrome did not fucking choose it.
Yeah.
So
It's
there
like,
is
you know,
a
how
line
much-
you have to draw.
So the thing with the victim mentality is
Yeah.
like, if you do take the victim mentality, you will never get anywhere really.
Yeah.
So it's just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
But, you know, how much responsibility is it really of yours that you ended up in or started in that situation you started in?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
So, you know, you do have to work. You do have to take personal responsibility. You know, you kind of have to say like, hey, I was born to, you know, this family and I just got to make the most of it from here on out. There's nothing I can do about it. But, you know, you can blame the economy for that, but you can't. So even though you can blame the economy, you still have to accept responsibility. It's both. You can take the victim mentality and be like, I am the victim of police violence or whatever, but that doesn't excuse you from not taking responsibility.
That's
the way I see it.
I think that's such an important thing to say, because I think very often what you just said isn't said with people like Jordan Peterson. It almost feels like sometimes, and Jocko Willink, David Goggins.
I don't want to like call them out or like say anything.
I love them all. I'm not calling them out either.
I think they're all fantastic, and you know, they're very important to listen to about stuff like this. But I think that is a blind spot of theirs.
It is. I mean, that's just very super. Like that's just a very kind of. It almost seems obvious. But it needs to be said.
The way I view it is like, you know, if you know, we're all human. Like if you're having an emotion, you didn't choose to have that emotion. That emotion is valid. Yeah. It's fine that you're having that. It's what you choose to do with it. If you choose to sulk in your victim mentality, then you're not going to get anywhere. And it's kind of your own fault. I mean, it's the fault of the economy. You can keep saying that, but
what is that going to do for you?
There are people in your situation who did more with less. So, you know, you can blame it, but you do have to be like, all right, well, I'm going to get online and I'm going to learn to code, or I'm going to learn math, and then I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to save up. And, you know, even if I got to take care of my family, and even if I got to do this, I'm still going to find a way to live the life I want to live and live the best life I can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's just the thing to say is, I think it's very easy to feel like you're either being told that you're a victim and you're completely helpless and there's nothing you can do, or you're told.
It's like it's accepting the reality of the situation as it is, but then not making it worse for yourself.
Actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just quickly pause this. I got to piss. I don't know if you can keep
I'm so
talking
glad
if
you said
want.
that, because I was going to stop us at some point to do the same.
Really, you know, as I was just pissing, I had this thought.
Okay.
We were talking about privilege. We were talking about all this stuff. And it made me think of like another reason why I think Donald Trump won, because he brought back the community of young white male, right? A lot of young white men voted for Donald Trump. And
I'm sure.
I forgot who I was talking to about this. Who was it? I think it was my friend Jordan Howell, if you're listening, shout out. I think it was him. We were talking about how a group, right, an identity right now that is kind of a little bit shitty is young white men, right? Like if you're a young white, because if you're a young white male, you can very easily be put into a category completely without knowing anything about the person that you are privileged, right? Oh. As a young white male, you're privileged. You don't know, like you're probably racist, whatever it is, right? Like you can almost be like, there is no identity for you to attach to as a young white male anymore, because you're so frowned upon by a lot of like super leftists. And I think a lot of those people voted for Donald Trump because they were like, oh yeah, this guy is validating me, because right now so many people think that I'm privileged. And there's so many young white men that aren't fucking privileged. I mean, not to like spout off about it, but I come from like a shitty fucking childhood, right? My parents are in and out of prison. My mom is schizophrenic and like in and out of a mental institution. And I just come from like a small fucking town and, you know, never experienced privilege, at least realistically. I guess you could say because I'm white, there are certain things maybe, but I've never fucking felt that way.
The idea of like specifically white privilege, I think is first of all, it's hard for us to understand what they're talking about when, if like a black person says you guys are privileged,
Yeah.
it's hard to understand what the idea in their head when it translates to ours.
Yeah.
So it is. So I just want to kind of like
with life.
say that first of all, because it is kind of hard for us to understand what maybe like a black person or like a black leftist would mean when they actually say that. But I don't want to say it, like the idea of white privilege, I think it's true, like we're like a kind of the dominant racial group, so to speak,
in America,
at least in like the majority terms. I mean, so there's just things that we don't deal with the way that a minority racial group has to deal with, and I think that's what.
Well, what people like what things? Just for example,
it's mostly like police things, and there's and especially in this country, you can go back and you can look at things like.
Well, but just to stop you, without going back, like today, right now, what things do like
today
minorities
doesn't exist without yesterday. We do need to go back, I think. So when we go back and we look at even if you want to even exclude slavery and you want to exclude Jim Crow, there's been things that have happened this side of the civil rights movement that have been, specifically the system trying to keep like black people down. Like they didn't let people get certain loans, stuff like that. And then even today, in AI, there's just because of the kind of the cumulative effect of kind of the racism in the system, so to speak. Even the AI today has recognized it, and it's getting built into the models.
Like how? I'm just curious. I've never heard that.
I'm fuzzy on the details, to be honest, but I was watching a woman give a talk in San Francisco about, I think, facial recognition, and it was automatically putting like black people in a category of like criminal or something like that versus white people. And it's because when you look at the training data that would go into that, even though black people are like 13% of the population, black men, which are like 6 to 7% of the population, they make up in absolute terms, I think, and this might not be true, you can check me in the comment section. In absolute terms, they make up the bulk of the prison system.
Yeah, right.
So when you're feeding an AI training data and it's getting told that these types of faces are more likely to be criminal, or that's how it's kind of coming out in the model, it's just kind of evidence that, hey, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. And then
well, see, the question, playing devil's advocate, is like, how is that, like, I don't understand how that could be racist with artificial intelligence, because isn't that going off of just data?
Yeah, so it's not that the AI is being racist. Yeah. It's not like,
I know what you mean. It's not like conscious.
But it's taking the real world data and information, and since it's spitting out that black people would be more likely to be a criminal, it's evidence that, if this is all the training data that we're giving it, and it's pointing that way, it's like, oh, so something in the numbers is indicating that our society is criminalizing black people.
Why? That's the question that I would have is like, why is it that? Why is that the case? Or just,
why do we over criminalize black people?
Yeah, what is that all about?
I mean, I can't explain why that is. I think it's just that, there's been things like David Duke encouraging his KKK members to take off their hoods, put on suits, and join the police force. That's like a very open thing. You can check me if you want, but I'm pretty sure that I'll be validated by the evidence. And so then when you have things like the drug war, and it's just, it doesn't mention color in it. It just says, if you've got marijuana, you're going to prison. And so, when you have like even just like a little bit of that type of thing in the system, it's not going to be so declarative that it is racist, but you see things like more police activity in poor neighborhoods than rich neighborhoods, and who's more likely to be poor is Black people.
Well, and I see that's where I always get to this point of, to me, it doesn't seem like it's racism, because if poor neighborhoods are where most of the crime is happening, and
well, we don't know that that's where most of the crime is happening. That's where the police are. And so it's tough to say, because when you look at crime statistics, it's not actual crime statistics, it's police activity statistics.
That makes sense.
And so if you're in a white neighborhood or a rich neighborhood, and you see some kids smoking pot and you want to arrest them, they have the resources, or their parents will have the resources to fight that much, much more than a poor neighborhood. So if there's a cop and his beat is the rich neighborhood, but he's got a quota, he's going to go to the poor neighborhood because it's much easier to go fill that quota. Because there's not as much education, there's not as much resources to fight back. So it's not that, even like, and I don't even want to call out like individual police or anything like that, because, I am so fucking grateful that there are, young men and women who will say, I'm not going to go make money on Wall Street. I want to protect the community, and they'll join the police or the military. It's the system and the way we've kind of got it around that our privilege protects us from understanding the effects on other people.
Well, see, like that all makes perfect sense, and that's just where I always like to dig and like push back is the idea,
because that's complicated. It doesn't look racist when you look at it. Just from our perspective, because there's nothing about color in the drug war laws. There's nothing about color in like banking practices. But if you were just kicked off your plantation essentially as a slave, you weren't given public education, you weren't given the resources, of course they're poor. Like, of course they're in those neighborhoods. Of course they're being over-policed. Like, it's not unexpected. And it just takes a little bit of like, oh, maybe if you shift your head and turn the evidence this way, it's like, oh, I see it. Like,
see, so that's, I mean, Joe Rogan has talked about this before. I don't remember with who or what. I think it was a police officer, or I don't remember who he was talking to, but he was talking about how, like, this idea of police brutality, right? Like, what is your thoughts on police brutality?
I think it's all because of the drug war. We have things like, what was it, the Andy Griffith show, where the cops are like, they're just like everybody else in there, but it's their job to be the police or something. And they were the peace officers at one point. But at some point, and we saw this with prohibition, right? We outlawed alcohol. And then what happened? The gangs got more violent. The police had to respond with violence. And it just created this cycle. And then within 10 years, we were like, all right, enough of this. We're done criminalizing alcohol. But then some years later, we're like, okay, but marijuana, on the other hand, none of that shit. And so that has created, almost, what is it, like 80 years now of that same cycle, back and forth, back and forth. We got to get more violent. We got to crack some skulls. We got to get after these guys. They're bringing drugs. They're poisoning the community, stuff like that. And so it creates this kind of rhetoric that reinforces an atmosphere of just being okay with being more and more violent.
That makes sense. So a question that I would have is, do you really think that like there are a lot of police officers who are racist that are like seeking to fucking bash someone that's smoking weed?
So when you think about like a racist person, and if your whole thing is like, oh, I just hate like this group of people, you can go work at 7-Eleven or what, just to get any job and just be racist at that job. And that's shitty. But if you really want to be like a professional racist, where do you go? I'm asking you, where would you go? If you truly did not like a certain type of people, Black people, what would you do? You'd go be a cop.
Yeah, that's what I see. You're trying to lead me to that.
I'm trying to lead you a little bit. And if you're someone who's like, oh, like, the Quran is like this evil book, and how dare those Muslims attack our towers? What are you going to do? You're going to go join the military. So it's this it's self-selection bias. And it's not that all cops are racist. It's not that all soldiers are racist. It's that there are people in those organizations who are racist, and they do get into those organizations because they are racist. And so,
well, I think that's a good distinction to make, because I don't think the majority of police officers are racist at all.
No, they're probably not.
Yeah, I think
that is a real phenomenon
it's
that
a fucking,
we need to acknowledge.
It's a job too. Like, of course, there's going to be people that it has all kinds of people. I think the fucking issue is probably that it's too easy to become a police officer. Right? I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, police officers, I mean, I know this from my own friends. I have friends who are Marines, and they literally told me, I don't want to go to college, so I'm going to be a Marine. So you're getting like the racism, you're getting people who who are not intellectually curious together. Yeah. And then it creates this atmosphere of, okay, well, we're going to be brothers now, and we're going to go do this job. And, you know, it's maybe even most of them think like, hey, we're just here to get rid of Saddam Hussein. We're just here to keep the peace or whatever. But then you equally have a couple other people who are like, no, we're here to kill some brown people or whatever. And so, you know, it's like this weird thing. And that's why I am very much an anti-interventionist. I think that we should not be going to war. We should not be arming rebels. We should not be imposing sanctions. We should not be condemning other people's leaders. Maybe Kim Jong-un is an exception. But, you know, in general, we need to be far more standoffish about other people's business than we have been. And I think the drug war is a great example of why that is, because it comes back to bite all of us, even though we're not a part of it. You know, I'm not a part of the drug war. I'm not a victim of it per se, but, you know, I am a victim of it in that a lot of our resources and a lot of the people who should be going after murderers, rapists, thieves, both big banks and little guys, those resources are now being channeled into drug dealers and stuff. And it's like, you know, what's the difference between heroin and morphine? Some doctors are saying that heroin's less addictive than morphine. They would prefer to give a guaranteed pure heroin to their patients than they would morphine, because they know morphine is more addictive. So it's like, wow, why is this drug still illegal? Yeah. And there's, you know, a myriad of reasons why, but racism is part of the reason why it was made illegal to begin with. I mean, it was cannabis for a long time, but they started to call it marijuana because people didn't know what that was. They didn't associate it with anything except maybe like the Mexicans who called it that, and they wanted to criminalize Mexicans. So it was just a way to get around the racism part, because they knew that people who are more centrist, more open-minded, more okay with other people, they would not be on board with just saying, yeah, fuck those guys. But if they can fuck those guys without saying that fuck those guys, then that's what they're going to try to go for.
Gotcha. Well, what, so like I wanted to say something that I think you probably would agree with. And then if you want to get into management of savagery, but Joe Rogan, I just listened to this the other day. That's why it's on my mind. He was saying, and I agree with him, and it's kind of ties into what you're saying, which is we should be focusing on somehow helping these communities that aren't doing well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that should be the focus is like, how can we actually fucking help these communities? Because being born in a community where it's just fucking hard to get out of and you feel trapped, and the shit going on with the police, it's true that, like, of course, if you live in a community where there's more crime.
And just to talk about like racism in general and like white privilege and stuff, I have this great example. So, you know, like you, I didn't really realize all this until pretty recently. So I'm not trying to, you know, be like, oh, I'm so much more moral than everybody else, because I didn't really understand this stuff either. So like people, you know, you would hear black people be like, hey, you have white privilege. We're being beaten up by the cops. And then, you know, the Rodney King thing. And it was like, oh, wow. So that there is evidence of it for us all to see. But until there's like real numbers in front of you, you don't really realize how bad the thing is, because you have no context. You have no perspective of it. But my a really good friend of mine is a Ghanaian immigrant. He's about as dark gets. and he drives a BMW. He likes nice cars. He's, he bought it himself. He's a hardworking guy. He drove it from Southern California to South Carolina and back. And it took 2 days for him to go from Texas to South Carolina and back, he said. And he got pulled over 19 times. I haven't been pulled over 19 times in my life. No. And this guy gets pulled over 19 times in 2 days. And he said every time they fucked with him. They threw out his cooler. They did this and that. So, racism in the police force, we know, is alive and well.
Well, I mean, it's anecdotal. I mean, who knows what more numbers would be? Was he speeding? Was there stuff going on? Maybe possibly BMW. Maybe he was enjoying going a little fast or something. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Is a lot of times to be caught speeding. And for sure, after I get caught speeding, I don't know about you, but I don't fucking speed for the rest of the day.
No, I'm the same. I've been pulled over like 3 times in my whole life.
Black people I've talked to them and they're very aware that, cops are kind of out there to look for them because they know that it's a non-protected class essentially. So
I think that's the point to make. I agree with that. I mean, I think if you're not being an asshole, that like police officers more likely will pull over someone who's black speeding, even if 2 people are speeding or whatever. Like, and the question, I guess, the question would be, is that because they're racist, or is it because the data and what the evidence has shown is maybe there's more likely to be something more going on, like with drugs or something,
But on an individual level, I don't think there is. And I think that the fact that the evidence points that way is evidence of the racism of saying, we're going to go after them. And the reason I like to talk about this stuff so much is because conservatives, especially Fox News, will call out Muslims and they'll say, why aren't you guys doing anything about the extremists in Arabia?
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's turn the other cheek then. Like, let's flip that coin. Why aren't we doing anything as white people about other racist white people?
Yeah.
We need to be leading by example. If we're the dominant racial group, again, dominant in just terms of our numbers.
Yeah.
We need to be taking responsibility and policing each other on this type of stuff. If we really want to get to like a post-racial society.
Yeah. If you're racist, you're a fucking caveman at this point. Like, hate
to break it to you.
It's fucking like, yeah.
Actually, I don't hate to break it to you.
It's just, to me, it's one of those things that it's fucking ridiculous at this point. Like, I just can't imagine at this point with everything we're experiencing and the level of connectivity that we have, like, where the fuck does that come from? Like, what is that? Is it you must be such a fucking insecure, like, validation seeking person if you're just immediately not liking someone.
If you're someone who takes pride in your, like, the fact that
just your skin color, right?
Like, wow, you really don't got a lot going on in
I think
your
that's
individual
the case.
life.
That
right?
must be the case, is that if you're racist and if you're only prideful simply because of your fucking skin color, which you didn't choose
or whatever,
then you must be such an insecure person with like other things that you're doing in your life. I mean, possibly that's one reason is like and that's you have to validate yourself in some way.
What you said about, caring about poor communities, it goes, just as much for black poor communities as white poor communities. We need to be caring about just everybody.
Yeah.
Because if we could just get some of these kids who would turn out to be racist to just be more educated or give them more opportunities to meet more people and do more things, I think it's far more likely that, they won't turn out to be, a violent person.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. Do you want to talk about Max Blumenthal, Management of Savagery?
Yeah.
Do you want to get into that some?
Where did you want to start?
Well, here's one thing that I thought he just said kind of at one of the videos I watched. One thing that he said that I just want to say to start with is, and I was just like, wow, that's crazy. He was saying, we live in a society right now where peace is so fucking just not even, it's so far outside of the normal conversation that politicians don't even fucking talk about peace.
Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard is the only one that I know, or actually Tulsi Gabbard and there's another progressive, Mike Gravel. He was a former senator in like the 80s, but they're the only ones who will consistently talk about how the intelligence agencies lie to us, how the military is out of control, how these regime change wars keep coming back to bite us in the ass. And the reason I loved Max Blumenthal's book, or just the talks on it, because I haven't read it, is that, I'm not interested in all the little different minutia, all the names and dates and stuff. It's that there's a consistent pattern. There's an action, and then we react way too harshly, and then it just gets blown way out of proportion. Things get way worse from our response. If we go back to the Middle East and we look at things like Iran, why is Iran the biggest enemy right now? Well, we could go back to when we overthrew a democratically elected prime minister who was going to nationalize their oil. That was why the British wanted to overthrow him. If we had just let them nationalize their oil and be the socialist country they wanted to be by giving the money from the oil to the people, Iran would not be the number one state sponsor of terror, which, by the way, they're not, but that's what we keep saying until it's just like keep lying enough and it's true. So we need to be looking at these types of actions that these people are doing, and that is why we need to be just so much more involved in our own politics. We cannot be trusting these leaders because they're only leading us down a path of more war, more devastation. So we overthrew Iran in the 50s. We installed a brutal dictator who allowed the oil to keep being extracted by like Exxon or something, BP, I have no idea. And then look at today. There was another revolution in the 80s to overthrow that dictator that we installed. And now there's some sort of like pseudo-Islamic fascist regime who, lightly still forbids women from not being covered. And it's like, that was a direct result of our intelligence agencies doing what they thought was best for the business class. And now it is coming back to bite us.
I was about to ask that. I was going to say, well, we have the most powerful military, right now.
And I mean, there's going to be a time where China will have a more powerful military than us. And so we really cannot be continuing to counter China.
Yeah.
We need to be working with China. Yeah. We need to stop having this adversarial relationship with every other regional power. We need to be like, all right, Russia, we're going to work with you. China, we're going to work with you. We're going to, instead of like trying to halt their progression, which is what kind of our IP laws are designed for, is to stop them from just getting more technology. We keep accusing them of stealing our technology, but that's how we got our technology in the 1800s. We stole it from the British. That's what every developing country wants to do. They want the technology of the most advanced country. It makes perfect sense. And if we could just empower them and just help them,
that would be the best fucking thing for us in the future, right? Like you have to think down the line. It would be the
best thing for the Chinese people as well, because if we could just insert our culture of freedom in there with our technology, they would not be the authoritarian regime they are today.
Yeah.
If we could have just helped them along the way the entire time, how, even if the Chinese Communist Party was still in power and they were still just a one-party state, they would not be the brutal regime that they are.
Yeah. I mean, that's what fucking freaks me out. If I think about, like, we have a lot of imports from China, right? We have a lot of stuff that comes from China, toys or just all kinds of shit. And
everything.
Like what could happen in the future with that if we piss them off enough?
Yeah, because I mean, we think about what NAFTA did. We took all of our manufacturing, everything that we built ourselves, and we just spread it out throughout the world. And I'm not complaining that the rest of the world is getting better. I'm complaining that nobody gave a shit about the people in the middle of the country who are now all, they had fine jobs. They lived a middle-class lifestyle off just their factory job or...
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you were talking about that earlier. That's right.
Or, the support of the factory job. And we hollowed out those communities. And, we wonder why they voted for Donald Trump. It's because he called out NAFTA.
Like, how do you do something about that, though? Because it is better. I mean, if you're talking about innovation, being efficient, being more productive. Like, what's the option there? Like, what's a solution to, it's so much cheaper to outsource production in China than to do it in America.
There's actually a Marxist professor who I thought had one of the best responses to NAFTA, and it was give the people the workers in the factories the opportunity to buy those factories before the ownership class could just hollow it out for parts and shut it all down. If we would have said, we're not letting you shut down that factory, you have to give the people of that town the option to buy it. Because think about why they closed it. It's not that factory was not competitive, or it was that it wasn't competitive, but it was viable. Yeah. It was fine. It was going to keep going, but they could make more money if they could pay the workers less. So they shut it down and they moved it overseas. But if we had just said, nope, you're not shutting it down, you can move overseas if you want, but that factory is going to keep making cars. How much better off would the people of those communities be today?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. I mean, how do you solve a problem like just it's cheaper to fucking make shit in other countries than it is in America? What is that? What is the biggest reason for that? Just the pay, like the wage that you have to pay people? I mean, material they have to pay for.
And maybe the material's already over there. Maybe that's like a competitive advantage they truly do have over us. I'm not convinced of that because we're a massive country and we have a lot of natural resources. But
is it the pay? They get paid a lot less, right?
Yeah, they can pay the workers less. There's less taxes. There's less regulations around things like different kinds of safeguards. And so, they could make more money. So they just did it.
Yeah.
And if we had politicians and we were involved in politics more, we could have had the opportunity to let the rest of the world rise up, but without crashing so much of middle America.
That's a really good point. And even if you say like, well, maybe this factory, we won't produce cars, but let's figure out something to fucking do here.
Exactly.
Like there's got to be a way.
There's already an organization in place that the workers could have figured out something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was gonna ask you. I brought up the military. Like we have the biggest military because people say like we have a responsibility though with shit is starting to go wrong in other countries. Yeah. Like, do we have a responsibility because of the influence, the power that we have to go try to help? I mean, isn't that the argument? We were trying to help, right?
So the military and the generals, especially the generals, they only get medals when there is a war. It is always in the interest of the generals and the intelligence agencies to be at war. So we need the political class to be able to put a hold on them. And I forget what else I was going to say.
Well, I was just saying like...
Oh, right. So so there's always a narrative, right? Every time we go into a war, it's that dictator's bad. Like we always get ready for a war. There's always a propaganda campaign. And so
we're fighting the bad guys.
Yeah. Right? And it looks different to different people. So, the people on the right, the far right, who, they don't really need to be convinced. They're kind of already like ready to go. It's the people in the center and the people on the left who need this doctrine of responsibility to protect is what Blumenthal calls it. And it's just this doctrine of they need help. There's a dictator. We need to stop them. And the only way to do that is with a military invasion or with sanctions. But sanctions are really just a precursor to the invasion. Because, when we think about Saddam Hussein was our guy. He was a bank robber and our CIA put him in charge. When we took him out, his Ba'athist CIA guys, his intelligence agency, they became ISIS. So these types of wars, this responsibility to protect doctrine, I totally get it. We totally feel bad that there are people being hurt around the world and we want to do something about it. But every time we do something about it, we make their lives infinitely worse.
Well, I think that's the good point to make is like, even if the intentions are good and that's trying.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
It's just not good enough.
The evidence is showing like shit's getting fucked up, right?
Then plus, they're tricking us into doing that because it's true. There's probably a way we could have handled Iraq War II that could have gotten rid of Saddam, but kept the country and safe, not as evil as it was. But
I'm a fan of Jocko Willink. He talks about that. I mean, he said like, we just left. We left and we probably shouldn't have left the way that we did, or something. Like he talks about that. We kind of left and left them abandoned. Yeah, exactly. There's a vacuum, and how the fuck, like they didn't have the resources to do anything themselves. And ISIS.
Yeah, but it's what's crazy about the situation we're in now is if we never would have gotten involved, things would have been fine.
I wanted to ask you that. What do you like? We were talking about that earlier. Yeah. Like, what could things look like now? If
it depends. Like if we 80s. Never got involved starting in like the 40s with their stuff, like it's so hard because we've been messing with them since at least the 20s. God. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was the start of it all, and it was the British kind of cutting or making like these colonial states. It was really, I could be wrong about this, but the Sykes-Picot Agreement, I'm pretty sure, was an agreement between France and Britain to cut up the colonies of the Middle East to create modern-day Syria and Iraq, regardless of what the actual people were like in those countries. Syria is just, it's got the Kurds, or Iraq has like the Kurds, it's got Sunni and Shia, and then we're trying to combine them all into a Western-style democracy. These people have been fighting since 700, the year 700 AD, and we're putting them together in a democracy. That might be well-intentioned to you and I. We might see that and be like, yeah, democracy. But the people on the ground who knew the reality of the situation, they should have known better than to put those people together in a democracy. They should have, I don't know how they should have done it, but it seems to me the way that they should have done it was give them each their own democracy.
Why did they do it the way that they did it?
I think it's because they had privilege. They didn't need to care because they're all the way in Britain and France. They don't have to care about what happens out there. They're not going to be the ones who are dying in any kind of conflict.
They were just like ignorant, I guess, to what maybe things would have been like otherwise.
I don't think they had to care. And then, it just depends. Like when we're talking about if we just stopped intervening, what would the world look like? It depends on when you're talking about, I think.
Yeah. What about now? How do you think? If
we just left now?
If we just like left now. Or even maybe a better way to put that is, and I know this is like just a broad question, and it's like,
it's fun to just think about.
What do you think steps could be to do it differently right now? To leave, or to do it in a different way, or to try it, like you were saying. I think it's to me it's like obvious we should be trying to work with China and other countries. Like it should be. I mean, how the fuck are we gonna get to that place as human beings? We're so tribal.
Yeah.
How are we gonna get to that place where we like actually feel like we want to work with other countries in like a really good, amicable way?
I mean, Andrew Yang talks about this all the time. He's, I had thought that way for a long time, but Andrew Yang was the first presidential candidate who I've ever heard say like, hey, we need to be working with China, not working against China, because we will lose to them eventually. So
you believe that? It's inevitable?
100%. They're 3 times our population. And they have an advantage over us in that they do have a dictator. There is one guy who can just be like, all right, we're done.
God.
With this, we're going to do that. And us, we need debate after debate and whatever. And that's not always the case because I think it was 2017. The military budget in our country is something like $500 billion. It's the next 10 nations combined. Is their military budget is the size of ours. Oh. Russia, our number one opponent, their whole military is like, I think it's like 200 billion. And we're spending, actually, it's not even that, it's smaller. So what they're spending on their whole apparatus, we're spending on like just our intelligence agencies. And the Congress, without any vote, without any media discussion, without anything, they gave an extra $200 billion to the military. No questions asked. They just gave it to them. And that's $200 billion. It takes $20 billion to end homelessness. It takes like $5 billion to give free college. It would cost it costs more to do healthcare, but how much more important are those things than the military?
Yeah.
Especially when we're already the dominant military force. And the thing with...
What do you think that's all about? Like, why the fuck do we think that it's more important to put money into the military? Is it a protection thing? We're trying to protect our freedom? We're scared?
I think it is a lot of fear, but I think the fear is from propaganda, and it's the military industrial complex. I mean, Eisenhower called it out in his farewell address. He was like, there are private businesses who create weapons, and they're going to take over, essentially. And they've sort of just become part of the intelligence agencies, generals now. So part of the problem of our government is that the people in government don't get paid half as good as the people in the private sector, right? So when you have people who are like federal prosecutors, they don't want to go after Goldman Sachs, because if they don't and they play nice, maybe 5 years later, Goldman Sachs will hire them at 10 times the rate. So that, and I think that's why the military has become so bloated and big as it is, because they'll tell the generals, like, buy our weapons and there will be a spot on the board for you later. And even if they're not coming out with it to say that, there's a very real, not need, but it's not a bad thing for the general to be on the board of a defense contractor, that, he could give them really good insights. But the fact that they're being so, just influenced so early and so often to be more militant, more violent with everybody around the world. Yeah. It's just, it's created the cycle that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I think that's, I haven't thought about it like that too much. The amount of like just the comparison of how much money it would take to maybe fix some of the issues we have in our own country compared to like what we're actually providing to the military. And that brings me to the question or the idea of, and I think we may have talked about it, but would you think it would be a good idea to make such a just high concept theory, but like if we as citizens were able to choose what we pay our taxes to, like on an app on our phones, like we have 20% we have to pay, but you get to fucking choose everything that you want to go to. Like what would that look like if that ever happened?
I honestly don't think the military would be hurting for money. There are people who want the military. Like, it's not like it's an unpopular institution. It's, and it's necessary. I worry that like, certain things would be like unfunded and stuff like that, but it would be things like the EPA or something, it wouldn't be the military, I don't think. I'm not so much of a fan of that. Because when you think about representative democracy versus direct democracy, like look at the problem we're having now with representative democracy. Nobody like is an expert at everything. And what a direct democracy would require is that we all are educated on every aspect of our politics. It makes far more sense to just be like, hey, this is going to be your job to know this shit inside and out and to just lead in a way that we want you to lead. But, I think one of the weaknesses of our Constitution is that there's something called a quorum in the Congress. You need a minimum number of Congress people to vote on something for that vote to be valid. There's nothing like that when it comes to the popular vote. So you can get 5 votes from someone, and if the other guy got 4 votes, you win. But what if there's 1 million people in that jurisdiction? It doesn't matter what they all say. When we look at like who voted in the last election, it was like 24% of the population voted for Trump and 25% of the population voted for Clinton, but most of us didn't vote. So why are we being stuck with one of these people?
Well, honestly, this is something I've asked. I don't know if I've asked you this before, like voting, if it became possible to vote directly.
Like for bills and stuff?
Or for bills for candidates. You vote on your phone. right? You can just pick your vote. It's just you can pick up your phone and vote rather than having to go through all the shit you have to go through and go down to the place and vote at a booth.
Yeah, why the
like,
fuck is election day on Tuesday? Everyone's at work. like
what?
It's like purposefully that way,
right? That's
to
what it is,
make
right?
it so that the fewest amount of people go vote.
It's weird. Like when you just said that, honestly, I will say like this is my stupidity. I didn't fucking know the numbers are that low for people who voted. That's
I was kind
crazy.
of ballparking it, but it is something like that.
It's low.
Like more people did not vote than voted for
right?
the president. Not that there are more people who voted or didn't vote than voted, but there are more people who didn't vote than who voted for the president.
For
every
Donald
time.
Trump, actually.
So he's not representing half the country. He's representing like 25%, a third of the country.
Wow.
So I don't know if we should have like an Australia style system where you're required to go vote. But it doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world if we put the election day on Saturday.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Put it on Saturday
or make it a week long. Give them a whole week to go vote.
And it's not a ton of hurdles that you have to jump over to go vote too.
Yeah,
like,
and put it on our phones. Come on, man.
I just wonder what it would be like if the process just changed where all right. People get nominated. Here are the options for president. Pull up your phone, multiple choice. Just vote. Yeah, and then you add up the amount of fucking people that voted, and then that's the person that wins.
Yeah,
it's the electoral college. All of this shit comes into play that makes it like fair for states. I'm not even sure how all that stuff works in detail, but it seems like there's a lot of.
So the thing is that if we got rid of the electoral college, then politicians would only need to go to New York, LA, San Francisco, and like a couple big cities.
Just because the amount of people, right?
Yeah. So the idea is that they wouldn't go to these other states and get their votes.
But wouldn't that would?
I don't think that that's actually what would happen because even though it is the biggest, those cities are very diverse. Like, we have conservatives in here. There might be different conservatives than Texan conservatives, but they would still vote for the same guy.
Yeah. And if we were able to just if every person over 18 or whatever was able to just directly vote without having to go down to some place, you could pull up an app on your phone. It was secure. Your identification had to be verified or whatever.
Yeah.
Then it wouldn't matter where the presidents go at that place, would it? Because now it's the whole country, like everyone. You have to actually appeal to everyone at that point because it's so easy to vote in that way.
Yeah. And right now, like with the electoral college, it's so easy to game it because, Democrats know they're going to win California. Republicans know they'll win Texas. So they don't have to go to those states. Yeah. They can concentrate on just Iowa, New Hampshire, like the purple states, they call them, the ones about equal. So, I think we should get rid of it because it doesn't technologically make any sense. Like we had that system because, there just wasn't mass communication back in the day.
That's a good point. Technology.
Yeah, technology is just better now. And, people like Iowa would suffer because they wouldn't have candidates going to them all the time. But the rest of the country would get to see the candidates. Yeah. So it's...
I think artificial intelligence is going to become the president. At some point.
As long as it's not a deep fake,
right.
And that might not be the way to go.
Yeah. Well, we're pushing over 2 hours. Is there anything you want to say? One final thought, one final point to make.
You said something in the first hour that I didn't want to jump on you for, but you were talking about death. Why do anything like, and there's a beautiful Charles Bukowski quote. And he says something like, death is something that's beautiful. It's something we all have in common. We're only here for a certain amount of time. Why can't we just love each other while we're all here and alive? Because it's not going to last forever. And so just love each other, understand one another, communicate more.
Compassion.
And maybe we can turn this whole thing around.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there, man. I think that's part of why I'm doing this. Open up these conversations, try to have an open mind,
Yeah, I think we're in a fly or die situation right now. We're either going to take off and go to the next level of humanity with AI and with each other as one, That doesn't mean a one world government. It just means we're all in this together as a species, or climate change is going to kill us. Nuclear war is going to kill us. Who knows?
And AI is going to
Or
help
AI will
nudge us there,
nudge
like
us.
you're saying.
Yeah. Our own psychological exploits off a cliff.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we'll do this again soon. We'll make
Yeah.
it a reoccurring thing.
Yeah,
Next time. I mean, this happens every time we say like, oh, we'll talk about this, but that was fucking awesome conversation. So
Yeah.
thank you
this is
so
great.
much for coming on, man. Really appreciate
Thanks for
it.
having me, and thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, we'll do it again soon. Thank you.